In 3, 2, 1. This is Acting Mastery. I'm Ben Matthews. Steve Kaplan has been called the comedy guru for good reason. He's an esteemed comedy consultant, author, and instructor who works with major studios like HBO, Disney, DreamWorks, and others, helping writers, directors, producers, and yes, actors, enhance the comedic elements of their work. He's also the author of 2 highly regarded books, The Hidden Tools of Comedy, The Serious Business of Being Funny, and The Comic Hero's Journey, serious story structure for fabulously funny films. I first came across Steve in my 20s when I was living in Los Angeles and attended a screenwriting conference where I heard him speak. It was like a revelation to me, as up until that point I didn't realize that comedy was something that could be taught. Steve opened up a whole world for me, revealing the hidden tools and techniques that make comedy work, and how it can be crafted like any other form of storytelling. I worked with Steve then in LA and again here in Australia while I was at film school. When I'm teaching, writing, or directing comedy, such as on my ABC show Bedhead, I find myself quoting Steve constantly. In today's episode, we're going to delve into the mechanics of comedy, discuss Steve's unique approach and his ideas, and explore how these insights can be applied to your own acting, writing, and directing careers. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this conversation is packed with valuable lessons that will change the way you think about comedy. Steve Kaplan, welcome to Acting Mastery.
I am welcomed. I feel very welcome.
Steve, I first came across you, I think it was back in 2008 or 9 when I was living in Los Angeles. I happened to attend a screenwriting conference that you were speaking at, and I was absolutely blown away by your lecture. It was something of a revelation to me at the time that comedy was something that could be learned and taught. Since then, subsequently, you came to Australia and actually taught at the film school that I was at a few years after that. And I think I've possibly done your workshop now 3 times. And every time
My God.
I know, I get something new from it. I've also read both your books, which I also loved. I guess I wanted to just start at the beginning and ask, how did you first become interested in comedy? Where did that begin?
I guess it began when I was being beaten up in grade school,
Got it.
and I was not a very popular kid. It could be because of my very unique sanitary habits, but I quickly learned that if you could make an entire class laugh, you gained a few points in popularity. Now, my problem is that I was one of the worst class clowns ever. My batting average was very low, but I did form this love of people who could make people laugh. And when other kids were trading baseball cards or listening to rock music or trying to go out with girls, I was at a very young age watching all the road movies with Bob Hope and Bing Crosby and Laurel and Hardy and the Marx Brothers, and I just fell in love with comedy and comedians. In fact, one embarrassing story is I'm at a dance at my Hebrew school. I think I'm about 13. And the band, such as they are taking suggestions. I go up to the band leader and I say, could you play "Thanks for the Memory," which is the signature Bob Hope song? And he looked at me very strangely, and then I kind of wandered away. But that is so. I always wanted to be somebody who, at first I thought I'd be an actor, and I was an actor for a short period of time. And I was just somebody who was fascinated by comedy. So when I had a friend who wanted to start a theater company because he was an actor and his partner was an actress, and so they wanted to create some place where they had roles to play. And uh, and at this meeting, and I was a director at that point, because I found it a lot easier to get other people to make people laugh than for me to get people to make people laugh. I like to tell the joke that I tried stand up, but I was very bad. People asked me never to come back, like not even as a customer. So they wanted to start a theater company, and I pitched them, let's start a theater company that was completely devoted to comedy.
Wow.
Because at that time in New York, uh, off Broadway took themselves very seriously. If you walked into any theater, you saw three people on stage in black turtlenecks with names like he or she or the pharmacist or the man with the big pain in his head, and I would sit in the back of those theaters, and uh, I would kind of make jokes about them in my head, sometimes not in my head out loud, which annoyed the people sitting next to me. So when I had a chance to start a theater company, I wanted to start one that was devoted to comedy. And so we called it Manhattan Punchline. And it was plays and stand up and improv. Michael Patrick King, who later went on to do Sex in the City and Two
Mm.
Broke Girls, he was in the improv group. Nathan Lane and Rita Rudner
Wow.
were people who were in our stand up nights, uh, and we discovered a lot of writers. David Crane, who did a little thing called Friends, um, Peter Tolan, who later was the executive producer of the Larry Sanders Show and wrote Analyze This. So it was very successful artistically, and it ran for 13 years,
Wow.
which is more time than most convicted murderers get. Uh, but then we fell victim to the realities of the marketplace, and so then I came to California, and while I was bouncing around California, somebody came up to me and said, I work for Robert McKee, who goes around the country, he goes around the world teaching story. And why don't you do for comedy what Robert McKee does for screenplays? And I said, okay. And it kind of started slow, and then very soon I was in Australia, and
Wow.
it's been going like that ever since. So the pandemic put a little wrinkle in things,
Sure.
but I'm back on the road in November. I'm doing a workshop in London,
Hmm.
and then Milan, and then I think I'm doing a little thing for you guys where I'm
Which
going to be remotely teaching comedy to actors,
which we are very, very excited about.
because I
How?
actually started out working with actors. I
Right.
mean, when I was at the theater company, um, we were doing plays, we were doing sketch comedy, and after doing it for a little while, I realized, what the fuck is going on? Why is something funny on a Thursday no longer funny on a Sunday?
Hmm.
So I was teaching an improv class at the time, and I just decided to try to explore what my friend Brian Rose used to call the physics of comedy. And we started to develop these exercises and games and tools that later became the basis of that first book, The Hidden Tools of Comedy. And so it was really started working with actors, and it was this guy who had worked with McKee who got me switched over to teaching comedy for writers. So actors are my first love. In fact, I married an actress. So
Did you
there.
really? There you go.
Yes.
That's amazing. Well, it makes a lot of sense because as soon as I took your course, I began to very quickly realize how applicable all of your tools were, not just for writing, but for acting. And certainly, if I'm ever working with an actor on a comedy scene, at some point I find myself quoting you. Um, So, so we're
And
thrilled
and
to.
and and where are my royalties for that? I'm gonna have to check the mail for that.
That's exactly right. Yes,
Yeah.
they're still in the mail. Um, one of the, am I correct too in thinking at some point you did some teaching in prisons?
Yes, yes. Um, uh, I for Manhattan Punchline
Right.
when I just got out of college. When I was still pursuing to a certain extent the life of an actor. Uh, I auditioned for this company that was called Wings, and they had a grant from the United States government, or and also the Virginia, to go to several prisons in Virginia and teach prisoners improv, do an improv workshop, and then we would leave and they would have an ongoing improv workshop. So they were, I guess, to help in their rehabilitation. So yeah, I mean, it was I was 22, 23 at the time. It was eye-opening.
Hmm.
And it taught me that it humbled me, because you go in with a lot of preconceptions, and if you're aware and kind of open to what's going on, you come away humbled, realizing I don't know a lot,
Hmm.
and other people's experiences are 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 other people's experiences, and it kind of taught me to judge less and observe more, which is very good for teaching comedy.
Amazing. You've said in your books and in your workshops that comedy tells the truth more than drama,
Yes.
and comedy tells the truth about
And
what it is to be human.
yeah, I mean, do I need to defend the more than drama part?
Go for it. I'm very
Okay.
curious to hear you explain what you mean.
The thing, when working with actors, uh, the first thing that I try to dissuade them about is that comedy is about being funny,
Hmm.
because funny is very subjective, and sometimes when you're being funny, you're not being truthful. But the the training that I had as an actor was about being deeply feeling and being aware of everything that was happening, and so that doesn't create comedy either. It's the ability to tell the truth about yourself, and the truth about ourselves is we're flawed, and we mess up, and we do embarrassing things, and there are times in which we don't, but those times are balanced by the times that we slip on a banana peel and we get a cream pie in the face, and we don't know why, and we don't know what's coming. So so it's those are the things that don't happen in drama. For instance, if you're playing and you're going to be or not to be, the example I use is, you've never seen an actor playing Hamlet fart during that big speech. To be or not, you've never seen that, because it would be ridiculous. It would break the mood, right?
Right.
Um, Yet people do pass wind. People do have gas. There's a whole pill called Gas X to get rid. I mean, it happens, but it doesn't happen in drama, because drama protects its characters so as to not render them ridiculous.
Hmm.
Whereas comedy both shows the truth about characters, both their glorious sides and their ridiculous sides. And that's why I think that comedy is the more complete art, because you can have every great comedy I can think of makes you feel something at some point. You care for the characters. You get emotionally caught up with them, as well as laugh at them. Whereas in uh, a kind of a standard drama, drama has a lot of very good qualities, but it a lot of times, and certainly way before our present time, the strands of comedy and drama were kept very separate. Now, even if you're going up for a a movie or a television show or a play, unless it's really bad, they all have comedy in them.
Mm.
Succession was a
Right.
comedy.
Yep.
The Bear,
Hmm.
which people say, how could that be a comedy? It's a comedy
Right.
because the things that they're worried about, the things that they're talking about, are both tragic and ridiculous.
Hmm.
Sometimes both at the same time. So the ability to know how to play a comic moment and how to then transition to a dramatic moment is some of the things that we teach with the tools.
Hmm.
Um, the tool of non-hero, which is the idea that you're not playing a comic hero, you're not playing a fool. It's somebody simply who lacks some, if not all, the essential skills and tools with which to win. But the inverse of that is that if you then give yourself those tools, you're creating more of a dramatic moment. And
Right.
then if you let those tools slip away, then it becomes more of a comic moment. And if you look at any great television sitcom from the 70s and 80s, um, yeah, I'm not sure if people would know the reference to Mary Tyler Moore.
Hmm.
Um, or almost any good sitcom. You have your characters, and they're doing silly things and silly things, and then about 21 minutes in, somebody turns to somebody else and says, when you said that, you really hurt me. And the
Mm.
other person says, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. And then there's the audience, if there was a live audience, they go, oh, because there's this moment. And then they would, relieve the curse of drama by then one of the characters being going back into character and being as stupid as he usually is, or as she usually is. So that's a matter of allowing yourself to not know at
Hmm.
a certain point. Whereas actors are basically trained to be good at what they're doing. The best walkers, the best talkers, the best dancers, the best fencers. And it takes real talent to not be the best,
Right.
to allow yourself the truth of telling the truth about yourself on stage in front of strangers. Where most people go kind of askew in playing comedy is they put a mask on. And the
Mm.
mask is either something ridiculous, which hides who they really are, or or the mask is some characterization that they're looking at, commenting on at as instead of telling the truth about themselves. Because the truth about ourselves, I mean, except for you, handsome and brilliant, the rest of us, we mess up. We're not perfect, and we're sometimes imperfect in the most embarrassing situations. Uh, and that's just the truth about ourselves. And when I was a director, I would always try to cast not the funniest person who came in or the person who was the best fit for the role. I would try to cast somebody who was both intelligent and truthful,
Hmm.
who can tell me something about themselves honestly without pretending or without hiding.
Hmm. Yeah, I got that. One of the other tools that I loved of yours that was a real revelation to me in your workshop was the idea of winning. That comedy characters are really just hell bent on winning. That it's not about an actor trying to be funny, it's about them trying to win. Can you maybe say more about that?
Well, I mean, it's a concept that uh, uh, the genesis, I guess, is Viola Spolin.
Mm.
Viola Spolin, improv for the theater. And one of the first points that she makes very strongly is that these structures that she has in the book are games with rules, and that the whole point isn't to be clever, isn't to be charming, isn't to be pithy. It's to play the game following the rules. And so when there I am back in New York at Manhattan Punchline, trying to figure out why something on Sunday wasn't as funny as something on Thursday, trying to dissect what's actually going on. And one of the things that occurred to me is that when the play wasn't going over with the audience, I mean, the actors would come off stage and say, "What a terrible audience." But I knew, because I was in the audience, I was always there. I was in the back of the house, always there, selling the tickets or, I knew that it wasn't the audience's fault. So I was trying to figure, what are the actors doing differently this night that they didn't do, say, on Thursday night or when they first started? And what came to me is they're trying to goose the reaction from the audience. They're trying to goose the laugh, which always has them lose the laugh. And they're not trying to accomplish what the character's trying to accomplish. And so early on, I invented this game that I called the classic problem of the three lawyers.
Yes.
And in the classic problem of the three lawyers, I brought up three actors and I said, the most important case of your careers began in a courthouse 4 blocks away 5 minutes ago. Solve the problem. And so, actors being actors, they started to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And I would let them, if they went on for 15 minutes, I would let them talk. And then I would simply say, that's great. Now I would simply want you to solve the problem in less than 15 minutes. And then they would do that. Okay, less than 9 minutes, they would do that. Less than 2 minutes, they would do that, until they just ran out of the room. They had to solve the problem in a finite amount of time. Often that's comedy. And then I got the idea. Oh, and people would laugh that because they were running out the room because they don't look like lawyers then.
Right.
How do lawyers look? I mean, how should lawyers look? There you are. If you do what you should do, there you are, shooting all over yourself in the parlance of Al Franken's 12-step character. So then I came up with the idea, what would happen if I gave them something impossible to do? Mm. So then I decided to tell them separately. I mean, the audience, the other actors in the class would watch this, and I would tell them separately, you have to be the second person to leave the room.
Yeah.
I would tell each of the three people, you have to be the second person to leave the room. But I wouldn't tell them, I would give them you're crazy, you love the number 2, or you're a Libra, you have to be in the middle, or you're just insane. And what would happen is, invariably, if they played the game, if they tried to solve the problem without being clever or cute, it would be hysterical. The audience, the class would be in stitches. One time, I'm doing this workshop at DreamWorks, and it's a bunch of animators who are not actors and not performers, but they're the ones who are creating the comedy, in the animated movie. So I give this problem to these three animators, one of whom is a very tall, lanky guy. And so I say, after I go through the thing, first you go just run out the room for muscle memory. Then I tell each of them individually, the other ones don't know it, but you have to be the second person out the room. And then I have all three to come together. And I say, okay, the classic problem of the three lawyers. The most important case of your careers began in a courthouse 4 blocks away 5 minutes ago. Go. And so these two guys immediately run to the door. I mean, all three of them run to the door. And then two of them grab this tall, lanky guy, and they're going to throw him out the door because then they could be second. But this tall, lanky guy, he put one foot on one end of the door, on one part of the door jamb, and the other foot on the other part of the door jamb, and he's horizontal. He's horizontal, and I've never heard laughter like that.
Yeah.
Because and the takeaway is always, they weren't trying to be funny. Mm. No one wrote that. No one choreographed it. It's simply if you give characters a need and a want and give them the permission to do what they need to do, comedy will occur. So that's winning. And um, what I do, and it's probably what I'll do in the class that I teach too, is I show a clip from a movie, not a terrible movie, but not a great movie. It's a romantic comedy called Alex and Emma, very obscure.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Kate Hudson and Luke Wilson. And there's all this stuff that they do that doesn't get them any closer to what they want. And
Mm.
I go frame by frame and I say, what do they need to do to win? Well, they need to do this. And then I show, well, why are they doing that? Because somebody thought, wouldn't it be funny if?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be funny if? And in terms of acting, what does the actor want to do? I mean, what does the character want to do? In terms of writing, what does the character want to do? Not what you think he or she should do, not what you think would be clever for them to say or do. What do they want to do? And then why aren't they doing it? And if you don't
Mm.
have a good reason for why they're not doing it, then what would happen if they did that? And
Mm.
how would that change the situation? Because if you allow a character to really do something, that forces the other character to also really do something,
Right.
as opposed to pretending to do things. Or I'm going to look like I'm doing something, but I'm really just doing it to be clever or charming, or because I'm playing an action. See, when I
Mm.
was an actor, we were taught, oh, play actions. But the way that they taught actions was you took a monologue and you broke it into 75 parts. And
Mm.
each part had a to verb: to amuse, to challenge, to confront. And maybe it's because I wasn't a very good actor, but I couldn't wrap my head around all those to verbs.
Hmm.
I could just figure out, what does this character want? What would he do to get what he wants? What's preventing him because of his character from not getting what he wants?
Right.
And that seemed more organic to me.
Part of the winning idea that you were talking about is also that characters do not give up, that comedy characters don't give up. And
Except when they do.
except when they do, I guess that's
And
true.
that creates drama.
Right. Right.
So we talk about the comic equation. An ordinary guy or gal, you know, um, without many of the required skills and tools with which to win, yet never giving up hope.
Mm.
So take any one of those elements of the equation away, and you reduce or diminish or erase the comic moment from the scene.
Right.
But how else can you have drama? How else can you have romance in a romantic comedy
Yeah.
unless there's a moment? And isn't there a moment in all those rom-coms, about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way through, where all is lost and the lovers break up and they're never going to get together again? Because when they give up, drama occurs.
Mm.
When your idiot character, won't take no for an answer, comedy occurs.
Mm.
There's a great scene um, in Play It Again, Sam, when Woody Allen's trying to pick up this very goth girl at an art museum, and and she goes, "You like this painting?" And she goes, she goes on and on. It's the epitome of death. It's nihilism. It's black. She goes on and on and on and on, and then he says, "So what are you doing Saturday night?" "I'm killing myself." He takes a beat and he goes, "What about Friday night?" Because because um, he's the it's the inescapable conclusion. He's not going to give up.
Yeah.
If she says, "I'm killing myself," "Oh my God, that's terrible." Okay,
Mm.
maybe that could be a reaction, but one, why would he say that if he wants to be with her? And two, it's too logical and too rational.
Mm.
One of the things that we talk about in terms of playing the truth is that logical, rational, and appropriate are lies we tell everybody else to maintain our social contract. You know, we're in an elevator, we've had a fight with our wives, we want to punch somebody out, but we don't, because there's a social contract in terms of what you're supposed to do in a social setting. But in comedy, you can be in an elevator and they could have that same fight in the elevator. And the comedy would be the other people in the elevator going, I want my floor to come. And that brings us to the tool of straight line, wavy line.
Which is maybe one of my all-time favorite Steve Kaplan tools.
The idea that it's not watching us, it's not, comedy isn't watching us watch somebody do something silly. And this is the quote I used from John Cleese. When they started Monty Python, they thought that comedy was watching somebody do something silly. They later came to realize that comedy is watching somebody watch somebody do something silly.
Right.
So that in almost every scene in which there's more than one person, you have somebody creating a problem, and often they're blind to the problem they're creating, and somebody aware of the problem but not able to solve it because they're a non-hero. And you see that over and over and over again. Somebody just being an idiot, and somebody else trying to deal with the idiot and not quite knowing what to do or what to say. And it's a very powerful acting tool, but it's hard for actors because actors have been trained to take everything in and react to everything. But comedy teaches us that sometimes your character isn't reacting to everything because your character doesn't see it. Your character's blind.
Yes, there's an obliviousness.
In that moment.
Yeah.
Oblivious, which doesn't mean they're stupid.
No.
But we're all oblivious at some point.
Right.
And it's about focus. That we're focused on the person, the man in trouble. That's Buster Keaton's theory of comedy, is it's about a man in trouble. So if you don't know who's in trouble, or if it's unclear, that diffuses focus. You know, who's in trouble at that moment. And in sketch comedy, it's a little clearer than in narrative comedy in films or television, but still it's often clear who's got the problem.
Right.
And sometimes you can have the problem and it's a dramatic moment for you, but some other character's oblivious to it. And so life goes on. So these are some of the tools that I hope to bring to Zoom, because Zoom isn't funny enough,
Exactly. Within that straight line, wavy line dynamic, it's a very different idea than the straight person and the funny person. Yes. In a comedy. Can you maybe explain the difference between?
Yes, it's a very poorly chosen term that I've been told about many times. Why did you choose? Because I couldn't think of something better. In a comedy duo, Abbott and Costello, a straight man, Bud Abbott, is feeding lines to the comedian, Lou Costello, so that Lou Costello can do funny things and have funny reactions. Burns and Allen. George Burns was the straight man. He kept on saying, "So what about your cousin, Gracie?" And Gracie was this idiot savant who would always say funny things, and that was kind of wise in a weird, off-centered way. And so Gracie would not realize how ditzy she was. George kind of saw it, but didn't quite know what to do about it. Always was bemused by it. But Abbott was always kind of upset with how crazy and silly Lou Costello was. But Lou Costello was always trying to figure out how to get around Bud Abbott, who always seemed so clear in what he was doing without deviating. And the whole thing about a straight man is that the straight man is simply being a foil and in service of the comedian. But in straight line, wavy line, it's teamwork. Mm-hmm. You can't be funny without the other. You can't have Mork without Mindy. Right. You need some human being in the equation at every moment in the equation to be us. on stage or on film? Who is the human being here who is being befuddled by this? And if they're not being befuddled by this, then you're telling me that what's happening isn't strange or isn't unusual. Now, listen, these rules are not written in stone because there are exceptions to this. One of the exception is parroting. Um, Airplane being the best example of that, where people are just being weird, and the only people who are noticing it is us in the audience.
Right.
Because we're so aware of what they should be saying and should be doing, that we're the ones who are noticing, and no one else on the plane is going, "What the hell?" Really? I mean, I keep on thinking about Peter Graves' um, pilot, who keeps on saying to this little boy, "Do you like watching Roman, biblical comedies when they're all in the, lathered up?" It's so horrible. And it's so ridiculous. So, but in most narrative comedies, there's usually going to be a pairing of somebody who is struggling with a problem and doesn't quite know what the solution is, and somebody who's blind to a problem. And one of the things about straight line, wavy line is that it can switch.
Right.
It can switch beat to beat because it's not about who's being funny. It's about who's in focus, who's struggling with the problem at that moment.
It's not fixed like the straight man and the funny man.
Right. Exactly. It's not fixed. It's a focusing dynamic that is storytelling as well as kind of creating a comic moment.
Yep. It really is an incredibly powerful tool. One of your other tools is metaphorical relationships. Can you maybe say something about that?
Some of these tools come straight out of Spolin.
Right.
Spolin has a great game where you're playing a scene. They give you a who, what, where, and a wife and a husband having dinner. Now doing it as though it were Shakespeare. Now do it as though it was Tennessee Williams. And it was always hysterical. And then I started to notice, because it was always there, but then I started to really notice how often it was used in film and television and plays. The Odd Couple being the most obvious example, where you have these two guys, and the surface reality is these two guys are friends and roommates. One's divorced, one's going through a divorce. But the metaphorical relationship, the essential relationship beneath the surface relationship, is Felix is acting as though he's the wife and Oscar's the husband.
Right.
And a lot of the comedy comes from that. Oscar comes to the door, and Felix opens the door and greets him with wearing an apron, saying, "Where were you?" And Oscar says, "I was at work." "Oh, you were at work at Hannigan's bar?" And Oscar says, "Somebody get a tape recorder, because no one's going to believe it." And that shows you how old that play is, because that's back when there were tape recorders.
Right.
So a metaphorical relationship is the idea that you can create comedy simply by having your characters act truthfully, but as though they were. English majors have often pointed out it's not a metaphor; it's a simile. They act truthfully as if they were somebody else. I was watching a clip from Ted Lasso the other day, and oftentimes that soccer team acts like a kindergarten class.
Right.
Ted says something, and then they go, "Oh, are we going to get?" And it's like a bunch of kids. And so part of the comedy is, of course, not only are they not acting like you would think professional soccer players act, and being from America, I have no idea how professional soccer players act, how soccer players, professional or not, act. But they do seem like a really open bunch that's open to ideas, and they all go, "Oh," and it is like a classroom of kids.
Right.
And that's a metaphor. Um, when the doggy club, I forget the actual name that they
Mm,
have, uh, where the camaraderie in that is so clear, like they're part of of this secret society. So if you turn on any good comedy and you're seeing these metaphorical relationships, they're acting as though, as if. And it's a way of telling the truth about the character in a way that's not prosaic and that's not logical, rational, and appropriate. Simply, if we start talking and I
mm.
start treating you like my little daughter, it's so cute.
Oh,
It's the
daddy.
cutest.
Oh,
It's got the
daddy.
cutest. But you see, you
Me.
wouldn't call me daddy
Right.
because that would be
Right.
breaking.
So I would
That would
just
be
say,
breaking.
Steve.
Yes, exactly. Because how would we act if we were,
Right.
but without breaking the surface reality?
Got
As soon
it.
as you say daddy, then it's some weird thing, and I and I don't want to get caught. I don't want to get caught by the police.
Got
But
it.
if you're so cute.
Oh,
You're got the cutest
Steve,
little.
stop
I,
it.
I got I got your
Oh,
nose. Get your nose. You know
right.
because because you know how you would act with your daughter.
Uh-huh.
But if it's like a cop and a guy who stopped for speeding acting like that, it's ridiculous. But within the metaphor, they're acting truthfully, honestly, and organically. So that's another great tool. Is there a metaphor here that we can use to heighten the scene and also tell the truth about what the relationships are like?
I think I heard the guys from Flight of the Conchords, Jermaine and Brett. I don't know if you know that HBO
Oh my
series.
God.
Yes.
I'm not worthy. I'm
Right.
not worthy. I love them.
Apparently
Why did
they
why did they break up?
I know. I know. But apparently they thought of themselves as 10-year-old boys, and their relationship with their manager Murray was a bit
Oh
like
yeah.
the school principal in a way. They were always being called into his office.
And,
Amazing.
and never called him on his bullshit.
That's right. Well, they couldn't,
Right.
could they?
Because you couldn't. If you were a 10-year-old kid called into the principal's office, you wouldn't go, "Hey, where did you go to school?" You wouldn't do that. You go, "Okay."
And one of the other elements that you were sort of speaking to as well before, when you were talking about winning, for example, in the three lawyer equation, is that idea that even though these characters or these actors are so committed to winning, there is something that they just can't see, something that they are oblivious to, in this case, that they all need to be second. So could you maybe say a little bit more about the importance of that obliviousness, or just taking skills away from a comedy character?
One of the things that we talk about almost more than anything else is the importance of not knowing. Don't know.
Mm,
Don't know. Part of the problem that actors have is they absolutely know everything.
right.
They know what's going to happen on page 32 because
Yeah.
they've read the whole script, and they know what the joke is coming up. They know too much,
Hmm.
and it's important to realize that knowing stuff is a lie.
Mm.
We know stuff, but we don't know what we don't know is enormous.
Mm. We
The
don't know
example
what's going to happen next.
we don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 seconds.
Right.
There could be an earthquake in 2 seconds.
Mm.
Don't please no, because and my roof could cave in.
Right.
You could have a satellite fall out of the sky and come crashing down in Australia. These things happen.
Yeah.
We live 5 seconds of our lives in hopes and guesses.
Mm.
We hope that the ceiling's not going to collapse. We guess it won't, but
Mm.
we don't know. The only people who know stuff for certain are idiots and people in dramas. Because in a drama, you never have a character go, "What? Huh?" That's
Right.
characters They know, they're smart. You can't put anything past them.
Mm.
Or they, you could say, I'm leaving you. For who? For Ben? I knew you were going with Ben. I could be hurt, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Right.
Yeah, as opposed to, I'm leaving you. For who? For Ben.
Mm.
Ben? Really? Because I have a whole different reaction. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. That reaction looked very familiar. So, um, one of there's a definition of comedy that I've heard before, and I'm actually just curious to get your take on it. It's a definition that I've become fond of. It's that comedy is tragedy minus dignity.
That's actually not mine, but I like that.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of see what you thought of that. That comedy is tragedy minus dignity. That really it's not funny for the characters involved. It's often pretty tragic. It's just that often there is either a character who is dealing with the tragedy with a lack of dignity,
Right.
or they're having their dignity robbed of them by the situation or someone else.
That's really good. Did you come up with, is that yours or did you
I
hear that
I
from somebody?
I honestly cannot remember anymore where I heard that.
Well,
I heard it years ago and I loved it.
that's a really good way of of phrasing it.
Mm,
My only thought as a teacher is that uh, it's I'm not sure if it would be a little limiting to just say to, okay, now lose
sure.
dignity, now
Right.
lose dignity.
Yeah.
But that's certainly a great analysis. I think about noises off.
Mm-hmm.
When they set up in the first act, this guy can't improvise, this guy stutters, and then when everything goes wrong, each of the people are faced with the very thing that they're least capable of doing. And so, as they're desperately trying to maintain this terrible play, um, they're all the loss of dignity. The great actor who cannot improvise to save his life.
Right.
It's hysterical to watch.
Yeah, I think also it kind of gives people permission that I guess maybe where a drama character might go to a 6 out of 10 emotionally, the comedy character might go to 8, 9, 10. Partly because they might not see the problem with them
Right.
getting that emotional. So I quite liked that and was curious to
Yeah, I can
see what you thought.
I can see that too. I mean, size is always a question.
Yeah.
Size is always a question, and it's a question of taste.
Mm,
Um, there's no one right way to do it, uh, and people can get it wrong.
right.
Um, it really depends upon do you have a character that's committed, that's connected to his truth,
Mm,
and cannot be shaken from his truth. Take a look at early Mel Brooks and late Mel Brooks.
mm,
Early Mel Brooks with Jerome Mostel, Gene Wilder,
mm-hmm.
and then Gene Wilder uh, in oh, I forget the name of the actor who played Black Bart in Blazing Saddles,
Mm,
Cleavon Little, I think, and then Gene Wilder in Young Frankenstein.
yeah.
The amount of ridiculousness, but he held on to the reality. His truth was brilliant. But then you see later Mel Brooks, like he had this thing on streaming, History of the World Part Two,
Right. Yeah.
and listen, you know, funny is subjective, and everybody
Mm,
has their own taste. I couldn't watch it
mm-hmm.
because the size seemed wrong for the target
Right. Right.
that they had they had jumped past what those characters should be could be reacting and kind of to the biggest reaction they could. And at a certain point, you want to believe that there's a human being there. And when it's just cartoon characters, you're led to believe, hey, even cartoon characters are more real than that. You know, Inside Out, everything that happens on Inside Out and Inside Out 2 is totally believable because you know who those characters are and where they're coming from. And so that's why, at the end of Inside Out and Inside Out 2, you're cavilling, you're crying
Right.
because they haven't tried to just be funny. Wouldn't it be funny if?
Yeah, there's a truth in their performances, or in the
Right.
story.
And the other thing is that the size of truth that you need in the theater is different from the size of truth you need on film
Of
or on
course.
video.
Yeah.
Michael Caine talks about the fact that when you're on film, your eyebrow, you know, what you don't need to do a big, it can be very small.
Yeah.
One of the things that I like to say to actors is to have the thought is to communicate the thought. To have the thought is to communicate the thought that unless you're in a 10,000 seat, arena, you don't have to work that hard to let people know what's going on in you, what you're thinking.
Really well said. Are there some other common pitfalls or traps that you see actors fall into when doing comedy?
Well, the traps I see are mostly the traps set by the directors. Faster, louder, funnier.
Right.
Be lighter. Have fun with it. Um, don't take it seriously. Um, those. I mean, actors are very dutiful creatures.
Right.
They really want to please. They are the canines of the creative class, and if you tell an actor faster, louder, funnier, uh, you're misunderstanding why the scene or the act is not working. When the director sits down and says, "This is slow, you've got to pick up the pace." That may be true. I once saw a comic scene in the actor director's workshop at the actor's studio, and Arthur Penn at the end of it said, they say the actor studio can't do comedy. I'm sitting back there, I'm going, they can't. They really can't. It's really terrible because everything was like funereal and so important.
Right.
But most times, the reason that the audience isn't connecting with the actors is they're not giving us a chance to. So when things aren't working, slow down, make your points. What's going on with you in the character? What do I need to know? If I don't know who you are, how can I be amused if things go this way or that way for you? I have to know what to expect. What are my expectations of you? And how do I know that unless you and the director have set that up in the beginning? What have you done in your entrance? What have you done in your first 2.5 minutes to let me know exactly who you are?
Right.
So then when the ceiling falls down, I can make an assumption. I have an expectation. Audiences should have expectations. And when our expectations aren't met or are subverted or are doubled down on, I can get pleasure from that. But when you're just a blank to me and something happens, that's just a blank on a blank.
Right.
So going faster isn't going to solve that problem. Going slower and making your points matter. That's usually what happened. I mean, when I was producing theater, when I was directing theater, I mean, that's what I would do when a show wasn't working. I would say, well, slow down, see what's really happening. We can always speed things up again. But right now, nothing means anything.
Yeah.
So, play it as though something means something, and we'll see where the audience is on that.
Yeah, I think I've heard someone say before, I know I say this sometimes in class when I'm dealing with exactly that issue, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. That if you slow it down, then you're actually going to find what this moment is about before you pick up the pace again.
Right.
How you just also spoke to the idea of knowing exactly who this character is when they come into a scene. How important is archetype in comedy?
Well, we're all individuals, but we're also all, slivers of personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of archetype is the fact that you put a kind of an emblem on somebody that we can then follow and understand. Oh, this guy's the dad. This guy's the crazy neighbor. You can, archetypes are I teach about the commedia dell'arte, and there they had 75, not 70, I'm exaggerating. They had dozens of different specific characters, and each of those characters had a specific mask and a specific costume. But I know people who try to figure out, well, if this was the Wizard of Oz, who's the Dorothy? Who's the Scarecrow? Who's the Tin Man? Who's Winnie the Pooh? Who's the Tigger in this? Who's the Eeyore? I mean, if you look at Seinfeld, Kramer's the Tigger. He's bouncing around, and
Right.
and George is the Eeyore. So part of what is detrimental to comic acting in actor training is the fact that, yes, you're a three-dimensional person and your character's a three-dimensional person, but that doesn't mean that you're not like a type. Because look at your roommate. How would you characterize your roommate? What a slob. There you go. You've nailed that. You've nailed that character in 3 words. A slob.
Right.
So you can then give some other attributes to it. But what's the main attribute I should know? What's the main attribute I can carry through? Part of the problem is the notion that you can create a backstory and a biography that explains everything.
Right. Yeah.
Mel Brooks once said, it's not that they left the ticket from the dry cleaner in the shirt. He's just a nervous guy. You see, if there's a ticket in the shirt, then I take the ticket out and I'm perfect.
Right.
I'm
Problem
a hero.
solved. Yeah.
But if I'm just a nervous guy, then don't give me a justification. Some people are just like that. They're nervous or they're fidgety or the things that I like to talk about is, let's look at the 6 characters from Friends. If you need somebody to come in and do a wisecrack, are you going to ask for Phoebe?
No.
It's got to be Chandler.
It's got to be Chandler.
Who do you want to say something stupid?
Right.
Joey.
Yeah.
Joey.
Yeah.
Who's going to be the mom?
Monica.
Monica. I mean, who's the sad sack?
The sad sack is Ross.
Ross, of course.
Yeah.
Who's the ingenue? Who's the ditzy ingenue? Rachel. Who's the ditzy one? So yes, those actors did a great job, and they made you care about those characters, and they had different edges, but they were archetypes.
Yep.
They were archetypes that you could write to as well as perform.
Amazing. I really also like an idea that you bring up in both your books about the one lie, the sort of the big lie before, more specifically in terms of writing, before you tell the truth. But can you explain what that idea is?
In a comedy, and this is for a feature because sitcoms have a different structure.
Yeah.
In a feature, you need to create a lie. A lie we call it the lie that tells the truth. It's something that could never happen, or probably could never happen. But if it did happen, given to these characters, what would happen then? So if you create a situation that's easily solved, you have a very tired sex comedy where you're going, I know it's going to happen because of course they're going to get together. Because, or if you create a situation in which a lie is piled onto another lie, you're going, well, where's the reality here?
Right.
I mean, I can believe in a reality of a guy waking up the same day over and over again if that's the only lie that you tell.
Yep.
And then given that, you got to play straight. You have to play it as it lays from then on in. Otherwise, you're just diluting the premise or you're undercutting the premise. Whereas a great premise like a kid wishes on a fortune telling machine, he wishes he were bigger. He wakes up the next day, he's a 30-year-old man. Could that ever happen? No. But if it did happen, what would happen then? Right. Well, he's got to get a job. Okay. Well, maybe he'll get a job at a shoe store or at a gas station. Then you come back to the fact that the premise, the lie, is just like the fuse that sets off the explosion, but you place the charges in a very specific way to create a blast radius, and the blast radius is the theme. Is you marry a premise to a theme, so that what's the theme of Big? I mean, the theme of Big is what's the connection between adulthood and childhood? So what a great way to explore that by having a kid become an adult, but really still a kid.
Right.
So where would he find work? Act 2, he can't just sit around. He's got to find work. So where would be the best place for him to explore that theme? A gas station? Toy company,
right?
Not even a toy. He meets the president of the toy company at the toy store because kids play at toy stores.
That's right.
So you meet a guy whose whole job is adults creating toys for children, and it's perfect. And the one thing about the resolution is not fixed. I know a lot of screenplay books say you have to start at the ending. You have to know where you're going. No, you don't have to know. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to know what explodes you into the narrative. But how it ends, I don't know. What are the characters that say?
Right.
When you truncate a character's through line in order to make your own point, that's your right. But it leaves me thinking, what would that character really want to do? What's really going to happen to that character? And because if audiences become attached to a character, they want to know. And you can leave them guessing, but you don't want to give them like, well, and now we're just going to cut to the end.
It's one of the things that I really love about that idea is that it is really, if you get that lie right or you get that premise right, then the story really begins to write itself if you're being true to the characters and not trying to write funny. Yeah.
Exactly. And if I know you guys are working on a sitcom idea right now. And if you listen to other sitcom showrunners who have had multiple seasons, they talk about the fact that where they thought this was going to end didn't really end the way they thought it was going to end at the beginning, because the actors make changes, the writers make changes, what happens in the telling of the story makes changes, and you're not sure. Just like in life, you're not sure exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We just have to see. And to me, that's the best thing about comedy is comedy tells the truth. And the truth is that we don't know how things are going to end. And in fact, when you write a comedy in which you're sure you know it's going to end, that's not a very successful comedy, because the audience is way in front of you and you're going, okay, I know she's going to ditch the bad boyfriend and go with the good boyfriend. Tell me something I don't know. Which is why comedies that surprise you, not surprise you like what the hell happened, but the end of a great comedy is like the end of a great joke, surprising yet inevitable in hindsight.
So great.
You didn't see it coming, but in hindsight, it had to happen that way.
And it's such good advice too for actors to, really to, again, as you were speaking to earlier, to play the truth of that character and to not necessarily know, even though you know what your lines are or where the scene's going to go, to still be completely open to the discovery of what happens in that moment.
Because if you're really good at acting, things are going to change.
Exactly.
I mean, if you're in a situation in which you have a rapport with the director or the playwright or the showrunner, you can suggest things. I mean, without being obnoxious or we won't talk about a certain Australian actor who has a reputation of being really, really obnoxious, but but this this streaming show that I like that just ended, Evil. The end of Evil, there's a sense that maybe her baby's the Antichrist, but you don't know. And then the actress playing the lead actress, who's the mother of the Antichrist, said, no, he's the Antichrist. And I think she knows it's the Antichrist, but what would you do? Would you go, hey, it's the Antichrist, kill my baby? Or would you just go, no, it'll be fine? Yeah. So there's an example of an actor changing the ending of something because at a certain point, the actor knows because the actor knows the character better than the writer.
Right.
I used to love playwrights who would say, I would say, why would this actor say things? The actor would say things because I wrote it. That's what I'm choosing what the actor says. And I'm going, no, the actor, thinking to myself, the actor's a living person. It's a human being. And the human being up till now wanted X, Y, Z. So why is the actor saying G or H?
Yeah.
Why, explain that to, and oftentimes the playwright would say, well, people have a lot of different angles to them. And I'm thinking, that's bullshit.
Yeah,
that's just the writer saying what the writer wants to say and not honoring the actor or the character, really.
Well, and the actor has been embodying that character's point of view for so long that
Exactly.
they know what that character wants.
As a director, I would often, my playwrights weren't always happy about this. I would often say when a line just kind of sat there and didn't play, I would often say, well, what would you say? And 9 times out of 10, the actor would say something simple and direct. And I would turn to the playwright and I would go, let's put that in, because it worked, as opposed to some flowery, thing that the playwright wanted. I remember one time we're doing this comedy, and it's it's kind of a romantic comedy. A woman had to choose between 3 guys, and earlier on she had these monologues about she saw on TV about documentary on whales. Whales have a 12-foot whatever, and she goes on and on. It's funny. And so comes the moment in where she has to choose between the boring husband, the romantic guy she knew from 2nd grade, and this beefy guy she met on a bus, who's played by a very talented stand-up called Steve Skrovan. And the original line was, "What do you want, Lucy? Boring home life, romance, poetry, and then, or do you want to have earth-bending sex that will?" And he went on and on and on, and it just didn't work. Right. And I said to him, Steve, what would you say? And Steve, who later told me he had been saving this for the right moment because he had already knew what he wanted to say. He said, "What do you want, Lucy? Boring home life, poetry and flowers, or whale dick?" Whale Dick, which was a callback, a reference to an earlier monologue, killed. It did in the theater what I wanted to always happen in the theater. Stop the play. You saw rows and rows of people just going back and forth in laughter. And you had to hold for about 35, 40 seconds.
Wow.
It was genius because not only was he the actor, but he was also a writer. He's a stand-up, so he knows comedy and he knows how to fashion punchlines. So, I don't know if any directors take these courses, but they should,
Got it.
because directors should know how actors need to work and want to work and should work.
Just one final question, Steve. Any films or television shows that are favorites of yours in terms of comedy that you think actors should look at, should study or watch?
One of my favorites is Groundhog Day. But I love Bridesmaids. I love 40-Year-Old Virgin. I love Ted Lasso. I love The Bear. The thing is that rather than me telling them what they should watch, I would say to them, what do you love? What comedy do you love? And now watch it with a critical eye. And what are they doing to make it so successful for you? And what lessons can you learn from it? Because every comedian's biography will talk about the fact that they became genius comedians by watching other genius comedians and stealing as much as they could, and then simply translating it into their own voice.
Steve Kaplan, thank you so much. It's been an honor.
Thank you, Ben. And I look forward to teaching this class.
We can't wait to host you. We'll see you soon.
But I'm not going to have headphones on. I'm just going to be me, just
What?
me with a voice.
Thank you, Steve. See you soon.
Okay.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.